purpose of today's discussion is to talk about a trend that is going on and that we've observed in a lot of universities, and that has to do with more and more universities are adopting deep, ambitious plans towards sustainable energy supply, and however, in order to do so, after they've done all the low-hanging fruits or energy conservation measures, low-hanging fruits, they're faced with having to turn towards deeper retrofits, more transformational energy retrofits on their campuses. And so gathered today, we have four decision makers from four universities, two from California and two from Canada. And despite their differences in climates, energy rates, and I was not going to go to differences in styles of presidents.
California is its own country.
Yeah, right. California is its own country. So they've all at least either implemented or at least are considering converting their heating systems from steam to hot water, and also to integrate heat recovery extensively in their solutions and their energy plans towards a sustainable energy supply. So they'll tell you about their unique perspectives, their challenges, their opportunities, and we'll finish with a little Q&A session. So please prepare your questions. So I'll introduce you to Mr. Denis Mondoux, Director of Utilities and Energy at McGill University. You can welcome him. This is Famida Ahmed, Director of Sustainability at Stanford University. Joshua Morjan, Director of Energy and Engineering at the University of California, Davis. And Sir Richard Franke, Assistant VP Campus Services and Business Operations at York University in Toronto. So starting with you, Josh, can you tell us a little bit about about University of California's carbon neutrality initiative, and what have you found? What has been your experience with STEAM, and why have you decided that you should move away from it?
Sure. Do I get the slides? Or
Yes.
the slides? Okay. Yeah. So if you didn't know, the University of California system, which is 10 campuses, 5 med centers, is all planning to be carbon neutral by 2025. It's a commitment that we've made, and we're actually working really hard to get there. There's a lot of different ways to get there, of course, and every campus is very different, even though we're all in California. As you know, California has a big microclimate. In Davis, it's 102 degrees right now. Obviously a lot different, and it's only an hour and a half away from here. That's UC Davis. It's basically a city next to the city of Davis, the campus is. And for us, our big challenge with carbon neutrality, there's a lot going on this graph, but it shows back from 1990 our greenhouse gas emissions in CO2 metric tons. And this star is where we were headed with our current trajectory with energy efficiency, like JP was saying. But we made some big steps, and we're looking right now at being at this green star with some major PV projects that we put in actually on campus, 16 megawatts of PV, which is maybe the largest on-campus PV installation that at least we've heard of. That ends up being about 14% of our electricity. And then we've got another 30 megawatts off-site down in Central California that's helping with that as well, coming online this year. So that's going to put us at the green line here by 2017. And what we're doing is 2025 is not that far away, and that's a really steep dive. So looking at how to get there, the real big challenge for us was our steam system. That's 40% of our carbon emissions, and so if we were going to get anywhere, we had to deal with that. That we have a central heating loop that has over 100 buildings, 8 million square feet on this steam system, And so I guess the thing I wanted to focus on today is really how we got that project off the ground. Right now we're still in an early phase where we're starting design by November. We're in a planning phase right now. But it's actually happening, and I think that was a big achievement. So there's a blue line here that says conservatively the hot water project puts us here, but some of the things I'm going to talk about are going to show that that's really the high end, and it could be anywhere between here and here, depending on how much electrification we can do, and of course the grid, where the grid in California goes. But the UC system is also working system-wide on buying more and more green electricity, and we're probably going to beat California to 100% renewable as well. So there's a lot going on with that, but this kind of shows the context. And then I guess for the steam system, that's a map of the campus with the age of the steam pipes. I know you can't see it, but the point is the purple stuff, which is most of it, is over 45 years old, coming up on 50 years here. And there's a lot of investment needed in the system, and that was really key for us. We're a public university. We don't have money to throw down on projects like this, but in framing it to our administration, it became really a question of are we going to spend money on this aging infrastructure that really is a big money pit when we look at it. We found that so far we've estimated between 30 and 50% losses on the distribution system in terms of energy. And if you have a steam system, you could be in that realm. It partly because it's so old, but partly because it's 350 degrees of steam, Fahrenheit, going through the ground. No matter how good your insulation is, you're going to have a lot higher losses on a system like that. Cost of maintenance compared to hot water is at least 10 times, based on a lot of other people that have experience with that. So what we were able to do is really ask this question to the campus: should we continue to? You probably all have pictures like this if you have a steam system. Should we keep spending money on this existing steam system? And we had lined up over the next 10 years $100 million in capital that we don't have yet, but it's planned, and as it comes in, we're going to be spending that on this renewal on the steam system. And we were able to take a break from that and say, wait a minute, should we spend that on the steam system, or should we put that into a system that's actually going to have a return on investment? So for us, that was kind of the big opportunity to put the brakes on something before the campus kept going down this road, and say this is really what we have to do if we're going to get to carbon neutrality, and it's actually a good investment, and we're throwing away money in the current system. There's a better way to do things. So that was kind of how we got there. So.
Great, thank you.
That was my last.
Moving on to Richard at York University, can you give us a bit of can you put us in context with your energy situation, and how have you come to contemplating converting your steam system to hot water, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you see?
Well, thanks to JP, and thanks to you all for being here at York University. York University is in Toronto, Canada. It's a Toronto university, but it is not the University of Toronto. I've got my buddy Ron here from University of Toronto. And Ron shares many of the issues that I have at York University. So we're at the northeastern edge of the city. As we contemplate the thought of converting from steam to hot water, we're really just staring at the mountain. You know, it's huge, and we're wondering, how do we start, where do we get the funding, and how do we get on with this. To give you a bit of a sense of the scale of our issue, York University, 55,000 students, 2 campuses. My discussion is made mostly about the main campus. So 480 acres, some 95 buildings, 9 million square feet of building surface. We've got a central energy plant with a cogen system. We generate 10 megawatts of power from 2 gas turbines. We've got 6 boilers, including the 2 on the cogens. We've got backup fuel oil for our dual fuel boilers, and we also have a big chiller plant. And half the chiller plant is driven by electricity, half of it's driven by steam. We've got a steam turbine chiller and a steam absorption chiller. And of course, the fuel for those chillers is natural gas. We've got about 4 kilometers of ring main, 2 20-inch chilled water pipes, and a steam distribution system. So we distribute steam and chilled water to the entire campus, and of course there's kilometers more of branch mains off of the main pipes. About 12,000 tons of chilled water capacity from the various chillers. So that sort of gives you a sense of scale. So as we contemplate the challenge of converting from steam to hot water, if we were to try and just replace steam with hot water, we'd be ripping up the roads throughout the campus. We'd be putting in new hot water pipes, connecting them to the buildings. Many of the buildings have steam circulating through the buildings, and so of course we'd have to convert all the mechanical systems in the buildings to take hot water instead of steam as well. So the capital costs and the level of disruption associated with that scale of conversion almost defies the imagination. And all of that, of course, in the context of going after those deeper, what was your expression, deeper hanging fruit? York University went through a $45 million energy conservation project over the last 7 years. We've done very well with that. Similar to our colleague earlier, we've reduced our energy consumption even as the university has grown. We've probably added 5 buildings to the campus since I've been there, but we've managed to reduce our utility consumption. So we're doing fairly well there, but it's really the low-hanging fruit that we've managed to tackle. If we want to get serious about GHG reductions, then we have to do something somewhat more dramatic, and that's what's bringing us to contemplate a shift of that kind of magnitude. Again, to put it in context, Ontario, Canada, which is the province that we're in, has adopted the cap and trade regime, so it's now operating with Quebec and California in that cap and trade regime. York University is a mandatory participant in the cap and trade regime, so in 4 years, when we get through our buy, we will have to buy and sell carbon credits on the market, and so we've got 4 years to figure out how to reduce our emissions and to put ourselves in the best posture possible. Canada, of course, is a signatory to the Paris Accord, and so we've got the federal government who is also putting a lot of pressure on the provinces and the provinces on the institutions to reduce their emissions. I don't know that we would even think about contemplating a 2026 target. I think 2050 is sort of the target range that we're looking at, but also that's a target that's generally been spoken to by the federal government and even the provincial government in their general pronouncements on the topic. So that's, folks, that's the challenge. That's what we're thinking about converting. But as I say, we're staring at the mountain and trying to figure out which path we take to get up and over the mountain.
Thank you. And Denis, can you tell us a little bit about your situation at McGill University in Montreal, not so far from Toronto? What in your reality with 2 campuses, with a larger one in downtown Montreal, a smaller one remote, and some of the projects that you're either have implemented or are planning, and how do you what would be your phasing approach to those?
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. I'm going to figure exactly where I'm heading.
Skip through that.
Okay. Just to quickly introduce McGill, it's located in downtown Montreal. It's about 200 buildings, 8 million square feet, split in 2 campuses, the main one being downtown. We are suffering from having very old buildings that require a lot of deferred maintenance at this very moment. We spend about 15 to 20 million each year in energy charges, 40% of which is natural gas. That represents 400 million megawatt hour of energy. We are putting 35 metric tons of CO2 in emissions. Okay. So that's about what McGill was. When I came in at McGill in 2010, I mean, prior to that, McGill has worked on many projects, but those projects weren't focused, they weren't strategic, they were not all also very, I would say, successful. So the first thing we've done is we created, I would say, a vision, a 5-year master plan. And the 5-year master plan was to, I would say, to work on 3 main axes: metering, better understand what's the problem, and look into the what we could improve, the low-hanging fruits. Doing small project with our operation, our staff. So getting them teaming with us to better understand what their issues. Letting them work out what are they suffering with, and work with some other capital-intensive projects. And altogether, I mean, we spent over 5 years just for the energy saving fund. We spent 22 million, being able to create savings for close to 4 million with a payback of about 5 years. And with that, that's our first round, the first 5-year master plan. We reduce our energy intensity by 26% and our emission by 34%. But one of the main projects we worked on during that time was on our remote campus, which is very, I mean, it's 1/10 of the main campus. And this campus, which is located on the west side of the island, the original situation over there is that we had a very old power plant supplying steam throughout the campus, but it was located in the very southeast side of the campus. And installation were in desperate need of investment. We had heat losses through the tunnel, 30, 40, 50% where we had to live with. And all the proposals we encountered at that time were just to say decentralize. But this decentralization was not appealing because it couldn't offer a very innovative option, was not helping in regard of sustainability, not helping in regard of reducing emission. So it was not very appealing. So we pursued doing some auditing, some survey, we brainstormed, and it came out very obvious that we had to maintain district heat, okay, but not to maintain steam, go with hot water. And that's from there that that's very, I would say, a smaller one, but that's from there that we came out with this new power plant located in the core of the campus, where we converted the load to hot water, where we worked the project also with the deferred maintenance plan, and for which then they were contributing for up to 6 million. So we ended up with a project of 8.5 million, out of which 6 million was from the deferred maintenance. We were able to generate 400,000 saving per year, and we had the backbone for, I would say, further development, where we could bring, I would say, more innovative solutions, where we could bring geothermal or solar options. So that project was kind of I would say, the pilot project for the following round, the downtown campus. What we've done then is that we went out for our second 5-year plan. We create our own objective, both imposed by the regulatories and also by our own ability to meet our own objectives. So we set ourselves to reduce our energy intensity by 27%, our emission again by 55% less, reduce our peak demand by 1.5 million megawatt, and get our portfolio of renewable energy to contain 53% of it. Okay. Now, we were good in the first 5-year plan, master plan, in some stuff, so we maintained it. We kept working with our energy conservation program, the insulation optimization, keeping up with the trades. We had to work to create more engagement, so we developed some project with the community and with our staff. But we also work more on projects that regard smart grids that use hot water. That's the way we've used to develop that. And we also work with what we call the mixed project, for which bigger projects that are due because of deferred maintenance, we were kind of aligning our energy conservation plan with the deferred maintenance plan. So kind of created a synergy to use that fund. Right? Again, it's a bit like the timing you were trying to achieve, using the perfect timing where that money is available. On the left side, I mean, it's a bit like York. We have a steam network that's about 4 kilometers long. It covers the whole campus. We intend to convert that, but to do it all at once will be very difficult. That's where the step-by-step or phase-by-phase comes out. And that's where we split the campuses in, I would say, 4 or 5 sections. The north one, the green one, is to be done later because there's a major project that we envision over there that's going to start in 2024. So for the moment being, we're not looking in this area. But for each of the other 4 sections, we went from auditing to create some solutions, implementing those solutions. These solutions are steam adverse. They look for hot water solution, energy conservation, or energy exchange. So we're trying to lower our demand. So by the time we're going to end up, we plan to end these 4 set areas by 2021. We have a better understanding what's the best option in regards of the new power plant or what the new format. But the good benefit also is that we will have trimmed our load everywhere. So that hot water need now will be sized, not oversized. So that's the phase-by-phase route.
Great, thank you. Yes, okay. So Famida, tell us a little bit about your project at Stanford that I'm sure a lot of us have heard about. What was, and more importantly, what were maybe the triggers to that project? A very transformational, very deep retrofit project, and some of the benefits that you had.
Sure. Actually, is there anybody who's heard about our project in this audience? All right. So, well, the campus is famous, and you know, one of the triggers, Stanford is known as a premier academic institution, but I know how many of us know us for having the best facilities department, right? That's not the university brand. So actually something that was really working for us, for those of us who joined the campus, you know, close to 10 years ago, was to really take our utilities and operations to the next generation of advancement so we could be on par with what we are teaching in the classroom. Sustainability on campus is a rather old concept and a core value. A campus that's 125 years old, has 1,000 buildings, about 250 that you can see from Google Maps, about 14.5 million square feet of developed land, and our total campus is actually we're very fortunate to have a very, very big land mass, 8,180 acres of land, which is a number that we're famous for. So doing sustainability work in a municipality, in a city like that was daunting, but we were lucky that we had our buildings metered since the 70s or early 80s. We knew where we were in terms of our low and mid-hanging fruits, and it's really the high-hanging that we were hired to do. And in the classrooms by then, this is 2007 and 8, interdisciplinary education is already happening for sustainability. But the concerted focus on sustainability and operations and utilities, that's really when it started in 2008 and 9. So that's an underlying trigger. And really to redo our energy and climate plan during that time were 3 key things. One is growth. As sensitive a topic it is, we have a lot of pressure to grow and to grow research for the kind of work that Stanford does for the country and the world, and it's just a reality we have to deal with, and we all know that growth cannot be sustainable unless you really do things to offset that. Economic viability, we had our cogeneration facility since 1987. It was coming to an end of its useful life, so we knew we had to do something about it. So do we stay with cogeneration and retrofit it, or do we really revamp our entire energy supply system and look at it differently and set it up again for the next generation of advanced campus? And finally, we wanted to be the best. It's something we are always pressured to do. do, but the truth is we actually like to strive for that as well. So our energy management plan, existing building, it's really the three-pronged approach, and many of our fine colleagues, you are seeing that theme. Advancement of energy efficiency in building level, in many ways you are kind of running to stand still. Yeah, you can retrofit it, and it's going to give you some good savings and deep savings, but again, it's something that comes up every 3-4 years, and you have to upkeep that. So it's a really good practice to have, but at the most it's giving you the 10% of the savings, and then with growth, it gets compensated for. I think we skipped a couple of slides. Then the existing buildings, when you have new constructions coming up, and we do a lot of that growth on campus, we learn that. You know, we build buildings to LEED Gold or Platinum standards. We make sure we have the latest technology in place. But even then, a new building becomes an existing building 2 years after operation, and then you have this inventory of buildings that you maintain. So that also cannot give you the GHG reduction solution. What it really came down to when we looked at the real-time heating and cooling usage on campus is that the answer was on the supply side. We had to transform where our energy was coming from and make it that it's on an electricity-based platform, so you can really go on the renewable route all you want, and set it up to an open and flexible technology so it's not tied to fossil fuels or least divorced from fossil fuel as much as possible. So those were sort of the conceptual notions that were going in for us. So I'll talk a little bit about the project components in a bit. We have heat recovery as the foundational platform, we have renewable energy, and we have very advanced optimization tools. But the real benefit, back to tying to why we did this and why we want to be proud of talking about it to our students and others, is this chart. Our GHG reduction as a result of this project that was 3 years in planning, 1 year in approval, and another 3 years in implementation, and now 2 years in operation since it came alive, reduced our GHG by 68%. That's a very deep reduction, very difficult to do for a large campus this size. But then there's growth. We are humble about that. You see this little bump, that is if we don't renew our power purchase agreement for all the renewables, that's going to go up, so that keeps the pressure on. And then the rest is again growth. So this is a real picture of from 1990 until 2050, which as you know is the IPCC goal, and the same trajectory for the Paris Accord, is we did a lot of work, but it keeps us humble to know that we have to go up to here to meet the IPCC goals. So all the work that's remaining for us is here, and I can talk about a little bit about that. But this benefit is what drove us to do the project on the supply side. We retired our cogeneration facility and have a heat recovery facility on campus, which is 88% thermally self-sufficient. And our electricity is coming directly from the California grid, as well as our own photovoltaic facilities. So 65% of our electricity portfolio is now renewable, and 35% is where the work is. And the last note to mention, those of us into sustainability and facilities, the co-benefits of sustainability and the energy-water nexus. When we were in cogeneration, we were using tremendous amount of fresh water. About 15 to 18% of the campus's fresh water was going towards the cooling process. And then we were expelling steam, which is a greenhouse gas. So we were actually in the self-perpetuating cycle, which didn't help us. Ever since we moved away from cogeneration and learned to capture our own wasted heat and repurpose it, we no longer have that freshwater use waste. So this chart just shows, because of our Energy System Innovations project, this is the drop you see in the freshwater use. And for our drought state, this is a very significant water conservation measure. So energy and water in many ways go hand in hand in California, the 6th largest economy in the country, and we are no, I'm just joking. So we're the best. No. We were motivated by leading by example in sustainability, but we're humbled by the fact that we still have a bit to go.
Great, thank you. So back to you, Josh. You told us why at UC Davis you see the future more in a hot water system than steam. But hot water not as hot water in an end in itself, but because it opens the door to heat recovery capabilities and advanced heat recovery technologies. Can you tell us a bit about what you see are the opportunities for heat recovery on your campus?
Yeah.
You can flip through my slides.
Those are some nice buildings. If you haven't been to the Stanford Central Energy Facility, you need to go visit it. It's a beautiful thing. Besides just wasting energy on our steam system as a driver for doing this project, that became apparent to our administration. But the other big driver is just the opportunity that when you get off of steam onto hot water, and it's not hot water that's the amazing thing. I mean, you could burn gas and make hot water, and you'd still get some savings for less distribution losses. But for us, I guess the big driver was that we have a district energy heating system, district cooling system. They're completely separate. And if you understand what a district cooling system is doing, it's actually collecting heat from the buildings. That's what your district cooling is doing. You're collecting heat. It's a heat collection system, and you're throwing it away at your cooling towers back at your central plant. And then you're burning gas to make steam and send it out to the building. So at least for an engineer, that's painful to watch that happen. And here's a picture of that, and I know this was a big driver for Stanford as well. This is just showing our cooling load over the course of a year. This is our heating load over the course of a year. And what this is showing is if we were doing heat recovery chiller, like a central heat recovery chiller, actually just replacing one of our existing chillers with a heat recovery chiller, we could do 60% of our heating load on the campus. So just from taking that heat rejection from this side and putting it into a hot water system, the problem is with steam you can't do that. Steam you got to burn gas, and you're stuck with that carbon footprint. So, but just going into that a little bit more, I had a couple of visuals, and this is just to kind of give you a picture of what I'm talking about. But right now we have this system. We've got a chiller plant fed by electricity. Like I said, we have a big solar PV farm as well as grid electricity. We have a 5 million gallon chill water storage tank. Very efficient chill water system that serves 8 million square feet, over 100 buildings. And then we have this natural gas in our steam boiler plant. And like I said, really high losses on that steam system. But again, these are totally separate systems. If you just converted this distribution system to hot water and put in hot water boilers here, or for example, heat exchangers even, it'd be great because your losses would go way down to 5 to 10% on the distribution to the buildings. But we didn't want to just, I mean, that in itself may be enough of a driver. The big opportunity is if you can start doing sharing between the two systems, tie those together and use this heat collection system that's collecting heat from your campus buildings and start putting that heat into this side. And then, that's what Stanford's done, and that was a big driver for them as well. But just to throw another idea out there, and since Ecosystems got this panel, this is one of the ones that they proposed, and we're in this phase right now where we're evaluating hot water distribution system versus a distributed hot water system. And over the next couple months, we're going to decide which one's the best. But this is really interesting if you have especially if you have a chilled water system or district cooling system. And this doesn't show it very well, but I was trying to keep the same theme going. But basically, you can have distributed water source heat pumps that are still tied into your chilled water system. So you're using the heat that's been recovered from the buildings in your chilled water system to drive the heating on these heat pumps. They're extracting the heat from that. And instead of doing it just centrally and sending it out through hot water pipes, you can do it at the building level or in clusters or small groups of buildings. And it'll save you a lot on the distribution of hot water. You can have a lot less tearing up the campus, which I know for Stanford, they were able to do that. It's amazing that they could do it. And we may be able to do it, but it's going to be it'll be a big challenge. We're right now evaluating the cost and the impact of that versus something like this, where if you can get heat pumps into the buildings themselves, use your chill water system as a heat collection system and run those heat pumps to provide the heating to the buildings. It's another alternative, but it's just to get at the idea of when you get off of gas and off of steam, there's a lot of options. He mentioned, you can get into ground source, you can get into solar thermal, and you can do that also with the chill water system now as our heat collection, heat distribution system when you look at it that way. So throw that out there. We're right now in that phase where we're evaluating this, so if any of you want to follow up with me in a couple of months, I'd be happy to share the results.
Great, thank you. Back to you, Richard. So these are all great concepts, going to hot water, installing heat recovery. Can you tell us a little bit about your situation in Ontario and the reality you're facing with regard to being able to secure long-term and reliable capital to fund those massive projects? I mean, you gave us a good overview of what your campus looks like, and maybe some of the people in the audience are facing similar questions. How do I get the capital?
Well, a couple of thoughts, and I'll just start by pointing out that as my colleagues from Stanford and UC Davis are ever more successful in reducing their consumption of natural gas, the cost of that gas goes down, right? And it actually makes a more difficult economic argument for us because the price of gas is so cheap. And that's a reality. As we look at converting from steam to hot water, reality is that the solutions are electric, whether it's heat recovery, whether it's geothermal, whether it's heat pumps, whether it's electric boilers. You're looking at converting from natural gas to electricity, and the spark spread, the difference in cost between natural gas and electricity in Ontario is quite massive. And of course, that's over the last few years has generated a windfall in financial resources for us as our cost of gas has gone down. But more to the point and to the question, as I mentioned earlier, Ontario has joined the cap and trade regime, and New York University, like several other universities in Ontario, are mandatory market participants, and so there's that whole regime and how it's going to operate. In fact, even how the market is going to operate, but more importantly, how the proceeds from the market are going to go back into the economy. And of course, you all recognize the philosophy behind cap and trade. You sell the carbon credits and use the cash, you use the proceeds to reinvest in your energy portfolio in the interest of reducing the consumption of natural gas. So sure enough, Ontario has gone through a couple of auctions now. The auctions actually have been quite successful. I think they oversold. I think the price of a ton is stable after two auctions is set at around $18 a ton. Is it, Ron? 18 Canadian dollars, of course. So now we have some sense of the dollar figures behind cap and trade, and that's of interest to us. But the Ontario government, who's now sitting on these funds, is now suggesting to us that we, the universities, and indeed the other public sectors, are eligible to start receiving the proceeds from the auctions, and they're now actually involved in, and we're involved with them in developing the mechanisms for flowing those funds to various public institutions so we can start reaping the benefits of cap and trade. But it's a little curious the way it's being rolled out, at least at this early stage. The suggestion is that, and it's rooted in legislation, that the funds will of course be distributed by some mechanism, and there's 3 or 4 different mechanisms that are being proposed, but will be distributed to institutions which will have to spend the money in year. In year suggests that if the money flows in the third quarter, because the auctions are quarterly, then that money still has to be spent in year, which means between the auction and the end of the fourth quarter, you've got to spend the money. Well, you can just imagine that if you're getting very late in the year announcements of subsidies and grants, well, how do you turn that money around and spend it overnight, and do it wisely, and reap the benefits of it. And so as we look at that emergent sort of environment and our challenge, which at some point should include converting from steam to hot water, which we figure, without having a defined plan, without having been able to think it through from a highly technical perspective, we still figure it's a 5 to 8 to 10 year phased implementation. Well, the problem with converting from steam to hot water is that once you commit to it, it's hard to roll the clock back. So if you're committing to that scale of conversion, if you're committing up front to tens of millions of dollars of expenses in a regime that is parsing out the dollars for in-year spends, then that's a very difficult capital game to play. How do you go to your university board of governors and say, we need a 5 to 10 year stable funding program where you're committing to tens of millions of dollars on the promise that the governments will elect to subsidize York University through the proceeds of cap and trade. So that's, of course, there's the other economic incentive, which is if you reduce the emissions, then you reduce the cost of carbon credits. So there is money that flows in from not having to buy credits, in addition to the grants that come in from the cap and trade proceeds. So there are multiple benefits, but at the end of the day, how do you convince your board of governors, how do you convince levels of government to commit to a multi-year, multi-tens of millions of dollars program that once you start, you can't walk away from? So that's, as we look at the mountain, it's not just the technical mountain, it's the funding mountain as well. How do you bring those together and get engagement and commitment, to start that kind of a project? So that's the challenge that we're facing at York University and several other Ontario universities.
Thank you, Richard. And back to you, Denis. So you told us about your two campuses and your phased approach, and we looked at the technical mountain and the financial mountain. Can you tell us a bit about the human mountain, if we can say? How have you been able to gain to build momentum from within your organization to be at the stage where you are right now, and to get buy-in from probably a number of stakeholders? I know you don't have stuff.
When I joined McGill University in 2010, our service didn't exist. And I really remember in the first 3 months, I think my bosses then asked me, are we keeping the steam network? I had not much time to figure out if it was a good idea, but I said, for the moment being, I think let's keep it on. Okay? We had to build some credibility. You cannot just start in. It was a brand new service. Okay? And if you're heading with bigger projects that are bigger than you, there's no way you're taking too much chances and are exposing yourself to too much risk in regards of making the right decision. So we went through what we earlier explained with the slides, a 5-year plan for which we say, let's concentrate first to create some credibility of our service. Metering, chasing the real problems, factually being able to speak out the problems, not being those people that have opinions about, okay, that could be the good thing or that could be the good solution. And bring back solutions that are measurable, metered, and that people believes in. When we got that, we built some credibility, and we worked that also with the trades. We worked that teaming with them, okay, listening to their problems. Sometimes that aren't not energy oriented, okay, but they had real problems on their daily work. So trying to meet with them, listen to them, help them, okay, and use their knowledge to help us develop these projects. Right. So by this, we create that momentum, okay, that participation. We create that credibility. And now when we're able to go and say, we've got these projects, and if you let us go part by part, phase by phase, we're going to bring you there. We've got that vision. It's not a short vision, it's a long vision. It's going to be 5 years up to the moment we will have converted most of the campus. It may be another 5 years because this bigger project will slow us in regards of changing the core steam network that we have. But at least we've got that vision and it works. And as you said, we cannot step back as we go on. So it's important to share that vision with them. So we create that momentum, we share that with them.
Great, thank you. And finally, with you, Famida, can you, what are some of so you told us about your project in terms of what triggered it and benefits. So what are some of the features, some of the features that you were able to actually implement, and can you give us a real vision of something that that maybe others could be inspired by?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the components you've heard either by now from me or fellow panelists, so it's maybe we can start with a summary. We have, for our Energy System Innovations program, so there is a trick in that name itself, one system and many innovations. So we actually hope to continue to build on it and not just stop here. Renewable energy is the founding principle, so we had to go away from cogen to set up this process so we would electrify our system, and then you can add more renewable energy to the source of the portfolio. So conceptually, very big component. The next biggest one is the heat recovery. So Josh showed their heat recovery overlap, and we also found that on our campus, when we look at the real heating and cooling demands, there was a lot of simultaneous overlap that was happening, up to 86% on certain times. And right away, you could see that there was a reuse story that needed to be seen. And I think about 10 years ago, that wasn't the time when many campuses were looking at the CT scan of the thermal use of the campus in that way. People were very focused on metering and what was happening at the building level, but not necessarily at a system level. And the third component, as part of the heat recovery, hot water comes in. We had 22 miles of piping that needed to be installed in less than 2 years. You know, a really big untold story there is the level of cooperation we had across campus. We have 7 schools at Stanford, hundreds of departments, and thousands of unique personalities. Those of us from college campuses, we know that you know, this can be a very, very difficult coordination job, but the part that I'm most proud of that we were able to pull off is actually a huge campus-wide collaboration on the disruption it caused and the construction that had to happen. We introduced the program as a surgery, that we're going to move the heart of the campus from the central energy facility to the west side of the campus, and when you move the heart, you have to rewire your entire vein system, and it's going to hurt for a little bit, but we're going to get many, many decades of life back. Believe it or not, that medical analogy actually made sense to people because we learn through pain in many ways, and sometimes that's what puts us in a different path. And the collective pain, the psychology of cooperation actually plays in. Then the last part I'll just very lightly touch on is our advanced optimization tool. All this new system, all the changes made, who's going to run this thing? And who's going to run this thing well? And you really need advanced software to do that. So recap of those 3. Today, our renewable energy platform, we're 65% renewable. 50% of it is coming from this off-site major facility that we opened late last year. Solar generation, it's a 67 megawatt facility in Kern County, Southern California. And it's providing 50% of our energy needs. And then the 3% of the smaller wedge you see in green tea color, that's our rooftop. So Josh is right, UC Davis has the highest rooftop on campus.
It's ground mount.
Ground mount, okay, but on campus. Our on campus is small, but small percentage of a big number is still a big number to us, and that's because when we looked at all the roof tiled facilities on campus where panels could go, we could only identify about 22 buildings that would take that, and we've finished all that work. And the rest of the green is actually coming from our great state of California, which I'm a huge fan of, if it's not obvious by now. So the greener California grid gets, the better we we benefit. Right now, that's based on a 33% renewable energy portfolio in California. Our California state's already aiming for 50% in the next 5 years or so, and there are already bills passing for 100. So the more green California gets, our pie gets better. Bitter. But a little bit of that work is where people like us stay humble, is because we still have to fulfill that. And that's a photo of our site. It's really cool. Those of us who've been to the Kern County, California, that's like the solar and wind house of California. Thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of panels owned by different companies. You know, it's almost like graveyard lots. Like those lots are for Stanford, those lots are for Google. It's actually very encouraging. And those are some photos of our rooftop installation. Still continues to inspire those of us who can't have a webcam to Kern County, but just looking at rooftop. And till this day, somehow solar panels make students happy. I mean, even though it's everywhere and everybody's done it by now, but something very symbolic about that. And just a photo of our ribbon cutting ceremony. I like this photo because the ribbon's so small. But that's our provost and Joe Stagner, who's our heat recovery guru and has really helped many of the California campuses to help understand this, and SunPower as our main partner. And then brings us to point number 2. Here's our heat recovery chart. So Josh, you've seen this 2,000 times over. But at this time, when we disclosed it to our board of trustees and showed them this huge opportunity, this is 2009, nobody believed us. And so then we spent 2 more years working with consulting firms, re-verifying our math and saying, is this crazy, or do we actually have this opportunity? So again, looking at things differently can really change the way we look at that. And today, those are our orange heat recovery chillers built by York custom chillers. And so I love those 2 photos. They shows from the very early first Excel spreadsheet that is now all automated and fancy looking to the modern chart there is today. So heat recovery was really the turning point, our aha moment on separating from cogen that was really thought of as the best thing since sliced bread. And we realized that perhaps not. Perhaps Stanford's ready for more. And here's our conversion chart as part of the heat recovery to work, the surgery that I talked about, 22 miles of piping work. And ironically, the drought in California actually helped because it kept the ground clean and work simple, and we just kept on digging. And the faculty did not like it, and there were a couple of grad students that wrote to the provost saying, I'm failing my exams. But we were like, do you want this campus to be a sustainable standard or not? So communication played a really big role. I will skip over this, but those of you who really want to study this potential for heat recovery, there's actually a lot of studies at the United Nations and other levels that are really looking at the science of heat recovery, ground source heat exchange, and hot water supply change along with it in a deep level. And finally, our advanced planning and system operation. So the heat recovery guru I talked about also happens to be a bit of a modeling genius. And he did this accidentally on a spreadsheet that Johnson Controls patented. And they will have this. But our CPOM, or the fancy name is the EOS, the optimization solution. It looks at about 1,200 variables of really the heating and cooling temperature across campus, how much to extract by the heat recovery chillers. Once it's extracted, how much to store in the hot water tank, and then how much to redistribute. And based on what is needed, how high do the heat recovery chillers have to run for, and therefore that level of electricity it's drawing from the grid and at the optimal price. So right away I've spat out about 10 variables for you, but imagine the granularity of many of these decisions, because this is also a very big economic project. And if we have excess electricity drawing, that it doesn't help our business case, so to speak. So EOS runs the Central Energy Facility, which is primarily a heat recovery facility, and the modeling is giving us tremendous amount of real-time monitoring and activity opportunities, which is now tied to the various analytics of the buildings, which is a different panel altogether. But it's given us a real modern platform to look at the campus's energy system, both at a system level as well as a very deep granular level, and really to look at the campus as a whole thing, as it's the heart that pumps, and to really know where everything else is going. So we are a year and a half into this. These are the major components, and if you ever want to visit us, we do offer tours every Thursday. On our website, you can book a facility tour. We've given hundreds and hundreds of tours by now, and we like it each time. But it's actually a very simple central energy facility, and the hero of the facility is this huge boiling tank. Yeah. So we have one big hot water tank here and two chill water tanks. These are the heat recovery chillers. The staff work here in this great facility, and here's the substation. So it's really amazing how we went from a pretty massive cogeneration to a very simple central energy facility, which looks more like a museum. I think it's one of the best looking plants out there, and it's a teaching facility for us. Students come, take classes, we offer tours, and actually the architects team who designed this wanted to even have a wedding there. Because it's so inspirational, to your word, that here's a campus that's built a facility that's beautiful, functional, it saves them so much resources, and it's a livable place that says more than sustainability, more than resource savings, and more than GHG reduction. So hopefully we've inspired our students, and we'll see what comes next.
Thank you, Famida, for this very graphic description of your of some engineering machines. So now turning to the audience, do you have any questions for some of our panelists? I think we have a couple more minutes. Is there a... Yep, sorry.
It seems I've seen some of this. It's still in those extreme cold conditions. Often there's some natural gas heating for peaking that happens. Is there, through Tap and Trade in Canada, more development of biogas at district scale out of either manure or garbage waste or whatever like that?
So interesting that you ask. The City of Toronto is somewhat dramatically increasing its generation of biogas from the essentially from the wet stream, from the biomass that it's picking up through the garbage collection. They're building a fairly significant biogas generation plant about 4 kilometers from New York University. So we actually approached the city to see if there was a mechanism for them to pipe that biogas directly to York University. While it was technically feasible, you quickly run into the regulatory and bureaucratic hurdles, which would have made it next to impossible. At the end of the day, the city is going to be just pumping that biogas into the local natural gas pipeline. And while there's a concept where they could have wheeled it through to us, it's dealing with biogas is somewhat philosophical rather than a real answer. But all that to say that there are a number of waste dumps that are collecting methane and burning it. The City of Toronto is increasing its generation of biogas, but it's not nearly on the scale necessary to replace the current consumption of natural gas. If we were to go down this road and had to rely on natural gas for peaking in those cold winters, as you suggest, then biogas might indeed be an option. York University itself doesn't generate nearly enough biomass, to consider creating a biogas generation facility.
One thing I'd say too is that I think it's more tied to what infrastructure you currently have. Like a number of UC campuses have cogen units that either just built or there's no way they're getting out of it. And for them to go to carbon neutrality means they have to go biogas if they're not going to get rid of their cogen. And there actually is a lot of development going on in the biogas world. At least the UC Office of the President has been developing projects across the nation. And it's that same situation where you're putting gas in somewhere else and you're getting credit for it. But that's what you do with solar as well. And it's real gas that someone's using, and so that is happening. I think it's going to happen a lot more in the future, especially as more people in California try to go that route under cap and trade.
Is there a trend or what cost range that's at?
For us, it's still high. I'd have to check the number. It's about, I think, 50% at least higher than natural gas right now. But I think part of that's due to it's still low supply, and as that supply comes up, things will change.
Mm-hmm. Now, the city of Toronto, they could have provided about 10% of our current needs, and the price was about 4 times the cost of the existing cost of natural gas. Mm-hmm. And then you have to clean the gas, and then there would have been the capital cost, of course, of building a pipeline, to a dedicated pipeline to our facility. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I'm assuming both your heating water system and also steam system use natural gas to generate steam as well as heating water. So the question is, if you look at steam or water, so you need probably 2 GPM to generate 1,000 pounds of steam. So the energy content in the steam is higher, probably 20 times higher than in the water. And as well as also when you transport the steam, probably you need lesser, probably 2.5. There's a half pipe sizes for the steam transport than the steam, and then also there is no pumping needed in the steam. So it's wondering when you come up with using heat water versus the steam, you guys done life cycle cost analysis to make the decision to go to the heating water system.
Sure. I mean, I think that's exactly why everyone was putting steam in the 60s and 70s, is for those reasons. You can put a lot of energy into a small pipe. But it wasn't a concern about energy. I mean, I think that was, transporting energy, but not how much energy it takes to get that energy from here to there. And reality is you don't need 350 degrees in our case for heating buildings. So you're making this really high grade heat, and you're tied to natural gas to do that. Whereas with hot water, you can do low grade heat, and now it opens up the world to all kinds of other low grade sources that you can't use with steam. So for us, that was the main driver. Our life cycle cost analysis is more about how much money we'd have to spend to keep our steam system going. I mean, besides the distribution losses on a new line, old lines are steam leaks. That's kind of what it does, and it causes a lot of issues all over, especially as they get older. But so for us, it was about, are we going to keep spending money on a system that inherently wastes a lot of energy? Because that's just what steam does. You cannot move energy from this point to that point as efficiently. Yes, we're going to have to put in bigger pipes if we go with hot water. Yes, we're going to have some pumping costs. But there's ways you can reduce that with hot water as you get different sources feeding into the system. You can tie into the ground, you can tie into wastewater, you can tie into solar thermal, you can do heat recovery out of a chill water system. And none of those are options with steam. So that was really the main decision point for us.
And we did our costs with net present value and life cycle cost throughout the study. Initially, when we put all the options together, it ranged from keeping cogen all the way to going completely electric and renewable, and there were about 18 options, different compositions of that. 18 boiled down to 9, and we actually presented to the Board of Trustees literally 9 options, saying these are all the options you have, and these are their net present values, and for each of them, this is your GHG reduction, this is your water reduction, and this is your initial capital cost. So you decide what kind of future you really want for Stanford.
I mean, we're throwing $3 to $5 million a year away on heating the grass right now with our steam lines. So that's pretty hard to argue with.
I mean, there are no maintenance, preventive maintenance for steam trap. Steam trap is blowing steam. You showed in your graph like how much cooling you need really for the steam condensate plant, because there are issues like that, or I'm sure you may have also sterilization, glass washer.
Sure, there's some things that need steam still,
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there's a lot of things we could get into, but you can also, a lot of times, meet those more effectively with the points locally.
You have a question, sir?
To your point, I was in downtown Philadelphia and we did basically the same analysis. And to make it worse, we got a steam from a public utility with no condensate control system. So it still was not economical to put it in. The main driver, besides the capital cost, was there was just no physical place to put in the pipes needed for the supply and return because of the size of things. We couldn't figure out how to make the ones to connect all different buildings.
So one thing Stanford did, and we were looking at as well, I don't know if you looked at the European style piping, thin-walled, shallow buried, and
It was just,
that's one thing. I mean, Stanford
they just filled with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I know Stanford is, I know Davis is, and I know when you go shallow, it's sometimes easier than 10 feet down where everything else is, but.
Yeah, we kept our steam system intact, by the way.
You get as a backup or?
No.
No, just, it's too
Didn't
much
wanna dig it out.
trouble to get it out.
Or you just abandoned it?
Yes, it's laying low for some historic relic down the road. With the sonar system, you find out where the ground is still diggable, I guess, and that's where the hot water, pre-insulated long store pipes from Norway, right? Denmark, sorry. That's what we installed.
All right.
Quick question on that system. Does that have external cooling? Because some of our direct buried old school steam pipes rotted off from the outside in.
Yeah, it's very different from the pre-insulated steam pipe, mostly because it uses a European standard. They've been doing it for 50 years, and they have an actual standard for how it has to get built. But it's all a bonded system, and it does have an outside coating, insulation, and pipe, but it's all manufactured together. And then they have a whole process for how it has to get built together. So I think it's a much more, we've had issues with our steam as well. I think this is a whole nother world.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your attendance, and please give a warm